Hi, I'm Rob Phillips. I'm the Market Vice President for Expedient. You know, David already kind of told you what we do, and then Corey did his Mythbuster, co-location Mythbuster, and so you know that we do more than co-location, and today we're providing multi-cloud services. But so here's what I'll say. One thing to remember about Expedient, on our path from co-location to a multi-cloud strategy and position today, we build our products and services listening to customers. There were a whole lot of customers involved in that. And we do a real good job at listening to customers, and we have a lot of smart people back there who like to have those discussions and whiteboard discussions and develop those types of services and solutions, and those come from solving problems for our customers. It's what we do best. It's what we love to do. So if you've got workloads and applications, and you're trying to figure out where those should go, what cloud to use, how to wrap managed services and security services around that, you want to talk to Expedient. So that's all I'll say. With that, let me introduce, this is a great pleasure because I used to work with Aditi. And Aditi Aji is the founder and CEO of Adrich. And she's here today with Joe Belacek, head of sales. Not Belichick, right? Not Belichick. Okay, good. That's not, we don't want to go there. Anyway, without further ado, I'll hand it over to these guys.
Good afternoon, and it's great to be here. Thanks, Rob. It's a bit of a life comes a full circle. You see, Pittsburgh is a small place, and it's just not too long ago I was on the other side of the table with Expedient as their product manager, and you know, a lot of what we do today has been my learnings there in terms of how customer-centric all the services were. And incidentally, the whole Adrich concept itself started with my background in product management. So at the core of it, we are a IoT consumer insights company. So data is the center of what we do. And it really came from my product management background in that in the tech world, right, there's a lot of usage data. You know exactly how the website is being used, how often your app is open, how people are using your product. And this really informs product managers on various decisions of new product launches, what features to include, what is that retention metric. Now, in the CPG, your food and beverage and the peanut butter and P&Gs of the world, they have a lot of data, but it all ends at the retail store. There's absolute black box once the product leaves the store. And because of that, they don't have that direct feedback from the consumers in terms of when the product is being used, how often it's being used. So our mission is to bring data-driven product development into the CPG world. Believe it or not, 85% of new products fail, and we want to solve that problem. Along the way, I met Joe Belacek, head of sales, and he's from the CPG, and I'll let him talk about his background, and he'll give an overview of what we do and how we can leverage IoT and AI to generate new data sets and how we monetize it today. Over to you, Joe.
Thanks. All right, so the theme that we're going with today, the theme of the entire talk right now is why model what we can measure. And so when we think about big data and that kind of big, overwhelming term, right, for the most part, it means taking a whole bunch of data and then running some analysis on it and getting a model to basically see what behavior will look like, right? And that's great, and it gets us to a lot of places, but if we can actually measure that behavior quantifiably and not have to model it, we're going to be more accurate with our decision making. So that's where this all starts. It's a disconnect between what we have in terms of usage modeling or a disconnect between what consumers actually do and what's reported, what companies hear about. So the example I love to give is, and I'm going to assume it's safe to say everybody in here has eaten a pizza before, right? All right, good. So my example that I'd give is, and I'm going to ask you all to answer this, and I'll kind of bucket it, right? Let's say we get an 8-cut slice of pizza, me and you individually, right? Of that 8 slices, how many do you eat? So if you don't eat any, raise your hand. Very good. If you eat 1 or 2, raise your hand. 3 or 4. Anything higher than 4. All right. Now I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask you a second question. How many of you actually have any idea how many pieces of pizza you eat on average? You count it, you write it down, you do the math, and you say, my number is 3. Exactly. So what we get when we look at self-reported data is we're making all these decisions based off of assumptions. And most of the time, those assumptions are wrong. I tell you, whenever I first kind of did that exercise with myself, my answer was 2. It's like 6 whenever I started to count. But that's what we're trying to inform. And as Aditi mentioned, we can look at every kind of stage of the sales cycle and get information. So we know before the purchase, from website usage, from lists that people keep. We know all before the purchase what that behavior looks like, and we can measure it, we can quantify it. At the point of purchase, that's also pretty simple. Scans through the register in a CPG sense, goes into a Nielsen database, we know exactly what that looks like. But then you get home and we can only get qualifiable information and not quantifiable information. That's where the kind of white space is. And that's where Adrich provides value. So we have a patent pending smart label. And I'm going to pass one around because I think it kind of helps to look at it. It's not the real one. It's not even a real circuit. So if you want to try to copy that, it's actually nothing. But what it does is it's this little tiny flexible label at high volume. And we can stick it on to anything and make it an IoT item. So that computer, that cup of coffee, everything in this room, we could put that label on and we can make it an Internet of Things item. So again, what's the value in that, right? It's the customized data and the communication that we can then drive off of that IoT data. So we talk about the four V's of big data, right? We're looking at the volume play here. This is an unprecedented level of volume, and it's one that we're really excited about and we think can really inform business at all levels. So we want to be able to, and I would tell you that we believe that we can in the very near future, measure every product, every user, and every use. It's a lot of freaking data. And so what I tell you is most of the people that I've heard talk today are talking about how we can simplify big data, how we can protect big data, things like that. What I'm telling you is I'm here to make your life more difficult by putting more data on top of you. But in the long run, I'm here to make your life easier and better because I'm going to give you better information and we're going to make decisions based on that better information. So it changes the formula. That's the way we put it. Right now you have your data, you run your analysis, and out comes the model. And then we use that model to make our modeled decision. But what if we could take this guy right here, that modeled behavior, and say, never mind, I don't want it. I want to put the actual behavior into the funnel, right? Now what we do, instead of looking at the very end and saying, here's our model, this is the behavior we're going to see. We say, here's our model, this is the behavior that we expected to see, this is the behavior that we saw, how good is our model? And if it sucks, we scrap the model and we start all over again, right? But if it's great, now we're making precise decisions based on actual consumer data. So where do we see this monetized, right? Because it's really cool, it's really great. You can put this label and make everything IoT. Who the hell cares? This is why I think you should care, right? The first one is you got real-time feedback. So up until this point, all the feedback that we have, and let's call it talking to consumers, right? It happens at a later date or it happens in a bias setting. So I worked in CPG for a long time. And we would do these in-home tests. And you'd sit there and you'd watch a consumer use a product in their home. no consumer uses the product the same way when they know they're being watched. So there's an innate bias to the use, right? Great. The second way that we would talk would be to survey or to questionnaire after the use. But like we just showed at the beginning of this, no one really remembers how they used it. And so they're coming up with some combination in their head of, well, God, I think I did this, and well, it sounded a lot better if I said I did that, so maybe I'll find somewhere in the middle. And again, that bias and that confusion comes in. So we can get real-time feedback, and from a quantifiable standpoint, we've already talked about it, but from a qualitative standpoint, we've also now increased the accuracy of our self-reported information because we're meeting the consumer at the point of use. So that's thing number one. We're getting better information on both sides of the coin. The second one is targeted merchandising. So from a CPG standpoint, a lot of people spend a lot of time figuring out how do we merchandise in a way where we're going to hit consumers who want to buy the product and entice them to buy more. My answer to that is we'll tell you exactly when the consumer who already bought your product is about to need your product. And through machine learning and AI going on in the background, we can model out their behaviors and we can actually get predictive for when they'll need it and when they'll run out. And what we can do based on that is tell the consumer, again, let's use, let's use a 2-liter of Pepsi, right? If I know that you have a quarter of a bottle of the 2-liter every day, and you have a fifth of the bottle left today, I can tell you you don't have enough. If I know you use that quarter, and I know that you have 2/3 today, I can tell you that by 3 days from now, you don't have enough. And that's where I meet the consumer at the point of need, and we drive that purchase or that upsell. The last one, and this is really where Adrich made the point earlier, and kind of where we've seen the most value, is kind of innovation optimization. That's how I'd put it. So when consumer products make new products, the amount of money put into it is massive. It's millions and millions of dollars every year, and 15% of the products work. Why? We're making decisions off of wrong assumptions. We're making products that nobody wants, or we're finding the wrong market and communicating to the wrong people to sell that product. Through our usage information, we can eliminate all of that. We can test concepts before they get into the market. Put it in a consumer's home. Do they actually use it? And if they actually use it, when it runs out, do they want another? Or was this a nice novelty item to have, right? You don't want novelty items in CPG. They move too fast, those die. We can also look and see, where is there a white space? Let's say we look at candy bars, and everything with peanut butter in the whole wide world is selling like crazy. And you make granola bars, and you don't have a peanut butter flavor. Maybe there's a white space right there. And so that's a potential place to innovate based on trends across multiple sectors where you can actually optimize that new item and avoid failure. So long term, where do we go, right? And that is what I'd say is we can get, in the way that we've modeled this and the way that we view it, we can get across the entire enterprise. And now these are just a few examples. I'm not going to insult intelligence and read them. But what I'd tell you is everywhere from consumer insights, sales and marketing, supply chain, finance, everywhere across the enterprise, it is valuable to have that in-home usage data. And now when we say in-home, that's only from a CPG standpoint. Let's talk about, warehousing, right? So if we look at the actual, and I'm going to use CPG again because it's what I know, the pallets in a warehouse, and we're talking about produce. If you don't use the certain amount of produce and a certain pallet in a certain amount of time, it goes bad and you got to throw it away and there's waste, right? With this, we have the ability to track the usage, meaning the lift, the move, the location, everything like that, of the pallet, and see maybe did we miss one over there and avoid the loss that way. We have the ability to track at every point in the supply chain what's going on with the product. And especially when we look at the in-home usage. Now we can inform production based on the actual consumption as opposed to scans going through a register. And that avoids a ton of excess. So at the end of the day, again, we're the IoT of everything, not the Internet of Things, the IoE, I guess is how I would put it. It's Internet of everything. And we really see moving forward, having that information is going to go miles and miles towards informing decisions at every single level of an organization and across every different function. So with that, I'd open it up for questions. I appreciate the time, and anybody with questions, fire away. Let's start back there. Sure.
How do you solve the power issue?
We have a printed battery that goes on each of the labels. And what I tell you is we have seen anywhere from 1 to 2 years worth of battery life on these items. My kind of follow-up answer to that is, and again, let's talk CPG, right? If you have a box of cereal that doesn't sell for 1 or 2 years, you should probably get rid of it. Go ahead.
What kind of data are you collecting? Like, all the products are different. Like, if you look at Pepsi or chips packet, it's completely different things that you're looking at. How do you even measure them?
We have a series of sensors within the chip. And what I tell you is based on the item, certain ones matter and certain ones don't, right? But through any combination of the 16, we can get to hundreds and hundreds of different data points. So simple answer is we can model location, we can model the actual ounces of use if you're talking about Pepsi. We can look at how many times you stick your hand in a bag of chips. So depending on what the actual customer is looking to see, we can adjust and change what's collected and focused on, and then feed that back to the end user in a very easy to read graphic.
So is your chip or that label connected to internet somehow?
The chip connects to Bluetooth. It has Bluetooth in it. That connects to your phone. That connects to our server.
So we need to have your app running on our mobile.
It would either be our app or we can run as part of a larger app. So let's say you have the Amazon app and you buy something Amazon branded. It could go through their app as well.
So far, do you have existing products?
We do. Yeah, we have, I can't give specific names, but we have the largest consumer cleaning brand in the world. We have one of the Fortune 200 food manufacturing companies. We're working with the largest floor care company in the world. And we've also worked with a couple of very large, what I would call tech outfits from Japan.
So do you customize different objective functions for different companies?
Absolutely.
And collect different data?
That's right. Yeah, we'll work at the kind of beginning of our process. We sit down and we'll identify what the KPIs are for the project, and then focus on those specific measurements in the dashboard that we provide to the end user. Yes?
I'm curious, have you worked out the sort of security of this? This kind of Internet of Things idea. One thing that what's in my mind is we're going to have all these different little circuit boards and all of our different products at home. What sort of security would be in place to ensure my products are secure?
Sure. Yeah, security is obviously always in focus and something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. And what I'd say is the first thing is right now, from a consumer standpoint, right? There's an opt-in associated with using our technology. So you don't have to opt into every single item that you want the label on. But at the beginning, when you sign up, we do ask the consumer to basically acknowledge and agree that their usage will be collected. I would tell you two things. The first is long-term, there is technology being developed that will allow us to collect usage information without ever personally identifying that information back to a user. So for us, that's obviously very valuable because now there's kind of no longer that personally identified risk. The second thing is we have taken from both a hardware and a software perspective, every precaution that we could think of, every precaution necessary to ensure nothing happens to the data. So it's one of those things, it evolves constantly, right? I can give you an answer today, it's different tomorrow. But that is kind of our first and utmost priority. Yes?
Are there certain products that you don't want this technology on? Like a certain, like bottles of alcohol or something. You don't want the supplier to know that, okay, I should sell more alcohol because
That's funny. You know, I can't tell you that we've worked with a company yet where I've felt like there's a conflict of interest, right? I'm sure that day will come. And I think that's a judgment call and one that we'll have to sit as a group and as an organization and think about. But what I tell you is, from a purchase standpoint, right? We don't, at this point, automatically purchase for the consumer. So, exactly. So what we'll do is we'll tell you, you know, you need this, or you're about to run out of this based on your behavior. Would you like to reorder, right? What we won't do is when you have 75% of your bottle of bourbon left, I'm not going to send it to you and say, hey, buddy, guess what you want this Tuesday? You know what I mean? So we're going to be selective. We're going to think about it. But, you know, I think if and when that day comes, it's kind of a case-by-case basis. And I think that's just a project we don't take.
Thank you.
Yes. That's all. We out?
Yeah, if you want to go to the back.
I'll talk to you back there.